These colors are so vibrant. Oh, I think this one's gonna look really good. This effect is definitely one of my favorites. Have you ever tried to create vibrant colors using stain only to end up with a mess? I'm gonna share with you the products and techniques I use to create these vibrant colors so you can create some stunning pieces of your own. Adding color to your wood projects is nothing new, but to achieve these vibrant, deep colors, the product you choose will make a huge difference. Today, I'll show you how I mix and apply Keda dye, as well as showcase the techniques I use to get this single color blue fade effect. Keda dye is an environmentally safe stain powder that's made in the USA. This kit comes in 5 different colors: red, yellow, black, brown, and blue. Blending these colors will create more variations. It's recommended to use a 1/4 teaspoon of powdered dye to a 6 to 8 ounces of either warm tap water or 70% alcohol. Rubbing alcohol will evaporate faster and reduce the raising of the wood grain. Adding more powder or liquid to the mixture will lessen the dye, but adding more powder may not darken the dye. To achieve a deeper color, more coats are recommended. After the dye is completely dissolved, check the color of the dye before applying. The color of the dye does not always represent the color it will be on the wood's surface. Mixing 2 dyes together will give you a wider range of colors like greens and purples. Keda dye is the preferred dye among many DIYers and professionals because of its quality. Unlike other products, these dyes are meant to be blended together. Because of this versatility, you can create some of the most stunning effects using endless techniques. I've tried many different effects, and this single color blue fade is one of the easiest. To create this effect, I'll use black and blue dyes as a base, and for a top coat, I'll use a single blue pigment to create my fade. It's recommended to prep your surface with 150 grit sandpaper. A higher grit sandpaper will tighten the grain and won't allow for penetration of the dye. After prepping your surface, it's recommended to soak the top of your project with warm water to raise the wood grain and then re-sand after it's dried. This will ensure for the best penetration of the dye without raising the wood grain on the final product. To apply this product, I like to cut up a shop towel into about 2-inch sections. For our first layer, I'll start by adding black and blue dyes that'll act as a contrast and an accent to our final project. By placing these dyes over the entire board and then sanding them back, we'll reveal an effect that showcases our deepest grain with a dark pigment. My goal for this project is to create a seamless fade that goes from a deep blue to a natural wood. Even though I'm going to be sanding these back and you're only going to see the darkest grain, I still want to make sure that I don't put any dye in the area that I want to be bare wood. On our final project, our black grain will contrast with our blue dye, and our blue grain will contrast with our light blue dye. I've found that adding this simple step to all of my projects has made a huge difference. It adds so much depth and plays with the eye and gives a really professional look. After placing these accent dyes in just the perfect spot, I'll come back with my sander and remove any dye that's on the surface. When sanding, I make sure not to press too hard or let the sander sit in one place too long. The goal is not to remove all the dye, just the dye that's on the surface, revealing the dye that's penetrated the most. After I'm done sanding, I'll use an air compressor to blow off the top and make sure we don't have any remaining dye, revealing a beautiful contrast with our deepest dark grain and our natural light wood. For our next layer, we'll start to apply our first top coat of blue dye. I started by applying a generous amount just to the edge of this project and slowly began to work it towards the right-hand side. My goal for this project is to use only one color, so I'm going to have to use a lot of different techniques to slowly blend and transition between a deep blue and a natural wood. As I'm applying this blue, I'm making sure that I don't let my furthest edge get dry or sit for too long. If you let this edge penetrate too far without moving it or diluting it, you'll end up with a harsh line or possibly a stain in your final project. As I begin to work this blue out and my rag becomes dry, I'll then replace it with a fresh rag and dilute it with pure alcohol and slowly blend my lines and my pigment towards the right-hand side. I've learned that when blending these colors left to right, it's best to continuously move your rag in one motion instead of rubbing back and forth. If you need to remove some dye from a certain area, you can rub back and forth, but to blend these colors together or fade a color, it's best to pull long strokes in one direction. After this coat dried out, you can see we have the effect we were looking for already. We have some really cool contrast between our blacks and our deep blue grain, and an awesome looking fade only using one color. For our next coat, we just needed to repeat the process and continue to add more vibrance to this board. The difference between a DIY finish and a professional looking finish is the amount of time and the amount of dye that you apply. To achieve a professional looking finish, it'll take several coats and a lot of patience. As I'm applying this coat of blue, I want to make sure that things don't get too dark too fast. I'm making sure to apply the bulk of my dye to the edge and continuing to blend it outwards. Things can get dark really quick, and we don't want to have a mess. After I've applied the bulk of my blue dye to the edge, I'll then come back with the pure alcohol and fresh rags and slowly dilute and soften this line and blend outwards. Using pure alcohol or warm water to dilute these edges and blend these lines while you're applying the dye is absolutely key. And for this project, it's even more important. Using this pure alcohol will help bring the dye back to the surface and help get us that baby blue we're looking for in the center without applying any more dye to get it. I've found that diluting and blending our colors together using the pure alcohol works much better than trying to dilute colors and layer them together. As we continue to get closer to our bare wood section, I'll make sure to switch out rags, soaking up any of the blue dye and using pure alcohol to help blend any of the dye that's left. After this layer dried out, I knew we had all the dye that we needed, and it was time to start showcasing our fade and blending our colors together. To blend these colors together, I'll use warm water and a lot of fresh rags. I've found that warm water works much better to blend these colors together. Pure alcohol has a tendency to strip away the dye, and when you're trying to blend the colors together, I found it's best to just use a lot of fresh rags and warm water to work between your sections and blend out your color. I prefer to use small circular patterns on our harshest lines to help activate the dye, and then use long strokes to help blend the dye. Using this warm water to blend these dyes together is the most crucial and time-consuming part of the entire project. The amount of time you spend letting these projects dry out and continuing to blend layer after layer will really showcase itself in the final product. After another round of blending these colors together using warm water and fresh rags, I was pretty happy with the fade that we had, but I still needed to add a clear coat before I could call this project done. I've tried many different clear coats and they all work, but for this project, I'm going to use what I have left in the shop and use an oil-based high-gloss polyurethane. Using a spray finish will help make sure we don't blend any of our lines, and using a high-gloss oil-based finish will really bring our colors back to life. Before you go, let me know in the comments below, what color combo should I do next? And don't forget, the best way to support me is to like and subscribe. We just passed our first 1,000 subscribers.